Blog Talk Radio.
Paranormal Review Radio.
Hello and welcome, everyone. It's Friday night, and you are listening to Paranormal Review Radio with your host, Anthony Agati in New York.
And me, Lucy Liebfried from Chicago. We are so happy that you're here with us tonight. Our chat room is up and running, so feel free to further discuss the topic or to ask a question. And you can also call in with your questions, too, 661-244-9831. Make sure you press the number 1 to get into the queue. Now, if you lose sound on your player, just refresh your page or log back in. You can also send us an email at paranormalreviewradio@yahoo.com, and don't forget to check us out on our Facebook show page.
Ever since man can remember, people have claimed to be able to talk to the dead. But it wasn't until two young sisters from Hydesville, New York, named Kate and Maggie Fox, in 1848, opened the doors to spiritualism and opened up our ears to the communication from the other side. This movement brought on many mediums and inventors who ultimately created a talking board to the masses, and is what we all are familiar with in today's world, the Ouija board. What makes these talking boards so special? Are they meant for evil? Do they possess powers we know nothing about? Can we really talk to our deceased loved ones on a piece of cardboard manufactured and marketed by a kid's toy company, Parker Brothers and Mattel? Well, let's talk to two experts in the field, and maybe we'll come away with answers we never knew about these mysterious attractions. Brandon Hodge is a collector, author, researcher, and entrepreneur residing in Austin, Texas. By day, he owns and operates the world's famous circus-themed Big Top Candy Shop. Every other waking minute is spent researching and maintaining the world's largest and finest collection of planchettes and spirit writing devices, which he features on his website and blog at mysteriousplanchet.com. His collections has been featured on the Science Channel show Oddities, and Brandon lent his expertise on talking boards to a recent episode of Mysteries at the Museum. Brandon is an award-winning author and is currently writing the definitive book on the history of spirit communication devices in collaboration with renowned Ouija expert and our next guest, Bob Murch. Robert Murch is the world's foremost collector, historian, and expert on Ouija and talking boards. To most, he's known simply as Murch. After watching the movie Witchboard in 1986, his strange relationship with the Ouija board began. Robert purchased Ouija board after Ouija board and became fascinated with the styles and makes, thus prompting him to study its history and its lore. He became friends with Kathy Fuld, granddaughter of the inventor of the Ouija board, and is the Fuld family's personal historian and is considered the foremost expert on the history of William Fuld and the Ouija board. Since then, Robert has worked with DreamWorks Studios as their Ouija consultant on the movie What Lies Beneath, and was contacted by the producers of the movies Sugar and Spice and Drive-Thru as well. He has made appearances on many television channels such as the Travel Channel, MTV, the BBC, and consulted on A&E's Paranormal State. He's also been featured in articles published in the Associated Press, USA Today, CNN.com, ABCnews.com, and various local newspapers. He's often interviewed and consulted for books and other projects dealing with Ouija or talking boards, is an occasional presenter at Salem's annual Festival of the Dead. Brandon, along with collaborator Robert Murch, will be special guest lecturers at next weekend's Phenomenology 105, I think I said that right, Paranormal Conference, March 21st to the 24th in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, discussing their upcoming book as well as history and the research of planchettes, talking boards, spirit communication devices, and the enigmatic Ouija. I can't think of two better people to talk about spirit boards than these two gentlemen. Sit back and enjoy the ride. Please help me in welcoming Mr. Brandon Hodge and Mr. Robert Murch to the show. Brandon, Robert, it's so great
Hello.
to have you on tonight.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, guys. Lucy here. You know what? We are just so excited to talk about Ouija tonight. And I really want to get this started by asking you, Brandon, when did you and Bob first meet, and what was that like?
Well, we met, I guess we're going on our third year or so now. We met through a mutual collector friend of ours, Andrew Vespia, from whom I had acquired a board. And in those days, collectors were very, very isolated to one another, as collectors and competitors will be. And Andrew and I had struck up a friendship. Once I purchased that board from him, I realized he actually lived in San Antonio. I lived in Austin. We struck up a friendship. He had gotten in touch with Bob, and we just started communicating and blossoming our friendship and sharing. And so that was that. And it's been a whirlwind since.
Well, Bob, can I call you Murch?
Please call me Murch.
Okay. Well, I just have to ask, okay? Really, the movie Witchboard? Even for Tommy... well, wait, even for Tawny Kitten, that was a bad movie. What was it about the movie that intrigued you?
It was the size of everyone's hair. It was the scariest part of that movie. No, it was one of the first times in kind of the media where you had actually seen the Ouija board take the main character of the movie. And so that was very fascinating to me that Kevin Tenney, the writer and director, actually decided to make the Ouija board, or the witch board in that case, the character which everyone else kind of ran around being afraid of. And that fascinated me.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what got you interested in planchettes, Brandon, and the idea of talking boards?
Well, I had always been interested in vintage items, in antique items, and in particular what I felt were items that had particular significance spiritually. And in my earlier days, in my college days, I was actually a bizarre magic performer. So I had a haunted antiques show that I would do locally, and particularly around Halloween, right? And so I had these items, and usually I would explain the significance of where they were, what they were. I tried to use genuine antiques and use them weave them into some sort of effect. And at some point in my early college years, I decided I needed to have a Ouija board effect in this, and at that point discovered planchettes and picked up my first one. Gosh, it's been maybe 12 years now, and just didn't look back. And at some point, right about the time Bob and I began collaborating, it just occurred to me that there was no flame keeper for planchettes. I had acquired a few at that point, and it just occurred to me that no one was really researching the history of those. It was as if their younger sibling, the Ouija board, was getting all the love, and they just weren't really given a lot of credit or a lot of attention paid to them. So that's when I began my research into them, really in earnest. I just sort of dabbled for years at that point and acquired some here and there where I could, but it was really that connection that made me feel like I needed to contribute to the larger dialogue of spirit communication tools and their history.
All right, so guys, I guess the age-old question, or I guess the big question regarding the topic tonight is, and Robert, you can probably answer this, what does Ouija mean? And I know it's a trademark and it's marketed that way. It's mostly talking boards or spirit boards. But what does Ouija mean, and why is it called that?
Well, like any great icon, there's a couple of legends that surround it. And for a long time, people had said that Ouija meant yes, yes. It was German and French words put together. But actually, about a year or two ago, I discovered a series of letters that were written to the editor of the Baltimore Sun. Baltimore, Maryland is where the Ouija board was born. And it was a back and forth with a few of the originators of the board. And the one thing they all agreed on was that the board actually named itself. They sat down for a seance. They asked the board what it wanted to be called, and it spelled out Ouija. And when they asked what that meant, it said good luck. So it became the Egyptian luck board. And that's where it all started. So that's back in 1890. Today, like you said, it is a registered trademark of Hasbro, which owns Parker Brothers. And the difference is, even us collectors often use Ouija as a general term, but it's specific. It's a brand. And so the larger group are called talking boards, like you mentioned.
You just mentioned also Egyptian luck board. I've heard it called that, but why is it called Egyptian luck board?
Well, if you go back in about the 1890s, there were a significant amount of things that were uncovered in Egypt in the Valley of the Kings. So at that time, what was seen as mystical or interesting was Egypt. And so it was just kind of a natural fit. It was so far away from everyone. You know, unlike today where you have the internet and you can watch things as they unfold around the world at the same time. It was so far away. It was so distant. It was so mystical.
Brandon, what's so fascinating about talking boards and the use of a planchette that gives it that mystique?
Well, I mean, the fact that whether you're a believer or not, these items were used by those who did think they were tapping into the other side. And it's funny, when you hold an item, I mean, and I don't know, you know, I don't know what to attribute it to. I know that when I get a new item and add it to the collection and handle it, it often seems you can tell when something has been used in that capacity or if something has just sat on the shelf. Now, whether that's the subconscious mind picking up the wear and tear that has accumulated on a board or a planchette over the years and you know, attributing those feelings to it or otherwise, I leave those sorts of theological questions to the higher moral authorities. But it always seems that when I get an item, it's like, wow, somebody not only cared for this and loved it, but they really felt that they were making a connection to something else with this item, and it's really fascinating.
Do you think it's the energy maybe that's left over of it being used?
It seems to be. Again, you know, I tend to not delve into the theology of it too much, but they sure seem to carry something, don't they?
Well,
absolutely.
You know, as you guys are both collectors of these talking boards, Murch, what's the appeal in collecting the boards? Is it the different styles that attract you to them, or is it the history and the story of it?
Yeah, well, I think it's all those things, and over the years, you know, it's been a long time. I started collecting back in 1992, and there just wasn't a whole lot of the history. Everything I read, so we're going back to actual encyclopedias on the shelf of the library as opposed to the internet, and every time I looked something up, it would be different, and that really set me off into trying to uncover such an iconic game. And why is something that everyone knows when you say Ouija, they all know what to do, they don't have to read the directions, and yet no one really knew where this came from. And so my heart lies in the research, and every board plays a piece of that puzzle. So often in our world, and we have a collectors group on Facebook, so if other people are listening and they collect boards, please look up the Ouija collectors group. We'd love to talk to you. What happens is if someone finds a board that they may not know anything about or that we've never seen before, but then someone else has another piece of the puzzle, and that's how we're able to kind of cobble this whole thing together. And as Brendan had mentioned, collectors are a tough breed. So for many years, I knew a lot of the collectors separately, and this collectors group was a bit of an experiment to see if we could actually put all these competing people who share the same love in one place. And today we have over 45 members, and it's an interesting place. So it fascinates me, the whole thing. Talking boards are a wonderful reflection of the decade that they were made in. So as Ouija was the Egyptian luck board when it started, it later became the Hindu luck board when it was things from India were seen as mystical or magical. And as you notice all these other companies that made all these other talking boards, you'll see swamis and genies, witches, all things that were seen as fascinating at the time. So they make wonderful decorations and usually amazing conversation pieces when people walk into your house and see them on the wall.
Well, you know what? This is for both of you. What is the oldest piece of talking board or planchette that you both have in your collection?
I have quite a few significant items that date from 1868. 1868 is really the year that planchettes broke into the national consciousness. They had been in use since about 1853. I may have one item that dates from the 1850s. It's got a pretty solid provenance, but basically, you've got Robert Dale Owen, the spiritualist, his friend H.F. Gardner, come back from France with these items where they've been in use for years. They have been manufactured on a very small scale in London for a few subsequent years to that, but really they come in 1860. There's a brief attempt by a bookseller to make them, but then in 1868 there's a magazine article that comes out, and it ends up in the early days of the Associated Press comes out and just the news of these items spreads like wildfire, as it would for the Ouija 40 years later. And so that year, 1868, really marks this just scramble by toy manufacturers and booksellers, predominantly booksellers in that day, just a mad scramble to produce these items. So a significant portion of my collection represents the earliest days of those spirit communication tools, when everyone was trying to cash in on that national craze, international craze, really. So that's my oldest there.
Murch, yours?
So I think I have something that Brandon also has, a matching thing from 1886. So in 1886, the talking board makes its appearance, we think, first in Ohio, in a series of newspaper articles that go spread all over the world, and they call it the New Planchette. At the same time, two men in Chestertown, E.C. Rice and Charles Kennard, both claim together that they invent the talking board. And we have a couple of these unknown talking boards that match, and one of mine came from Chestertown. So 1886 may be the oldest board that I have in my collection.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll do a copy of that board. That's a rare one. If only we could prove our theory.
Someday.
I mean, I may have my following information incorrect, because most of the information I got from the internet, and as you know, not everything is pretty much fact from the internet. But upon doing my research for the show, I've learned that talking boards goes way back in history, even before the 1800s. There's a story about talking board and planchette writing in China called Fuji that dates back about 3,000 years ago, and another story about the Greek philosopher Pythagoras, who used a mystical table on wheels pointing to signs. I guess my question to you, Rob, is this. Can we define the birth of talking boards or the concept of talking boards to a particular origin or culture?
Well, this is an interesting conversation that is constantly moving. So, what is a talking board? And what's fact? So, though you read something that was once published in the Encyclopedia of the Occult that said Pythagoras used it, there's actually no proof that ever happened. And, in fact, none of what that says was actually from the translation that the person translated. It was either purposely put in or a mistake, and it's never been able to be proved. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean we won't see talking boards even before Greek. But the truth is, we don't see what we think of as a talking board until, I think, Brandon, it's like 1876, where we see someone using a rod to point out letters. So if we say a talking board is a piece of paper or a board with letters and numbers, symbols and words on it, and that there's a movable piece that you place your hands on that points out those letters, we go to 1886. If you're talking about pendulums, or if you're talking about other forms of fortune-telling that are related, or divination, all in the same family, those things go way back further. So to date, again, I will say this to date because we push this time back all the time. 1886 and the talking board was basically an American invention. But it was an evolution. It's not like a hard line. I mean, these things, I'm sure Brandon will talk a little bit about what the planchette is, because it existed on its own before it became part of the talking board.
Right, and the interesting thing, I do like to draw a little bit harder line because you can trace where certainly we can look back at Fuji writing, for example, which is usually done with a long rod in sand, and it certainly has a more ancient origin, but the stricter line is drawn in that planchettes, which in America, and as they were used in France, are heart-shaped boards with two wheeled casters on them on the back, and the third wheel in the front is actually a pencil that you would put through and adjust, and it would write out messages. So that's the earliest, for those listening who weren't familiar with planchettes beyond their use as a pointer on a talking board. The writing planchettes, that's their form, is a heart-shaped board with two wheels and a pencil to write out messages. And so, for me, the hard line is drawn in that device, as invented in France, propagated in London, and popularized in America, did not have its origins or its influence in Fuji writing, in the same way that the American talking board, as spiritualists were using, really beginning with the Fox sisters in some form, and that they would have alphabet cards and they would point to letters with pencils. And then a rod was used as a pointer in 1876, and then in 1886 we have the final evolution. Just as similarly, those devices, there's no influence. There was no ancient document, from the Lost Library of Alexander that was uncovered and copied and used to create those devices. In the same way that Fuji writing had no direct influence on the creation of planchettes 40 years before. They evolved independently, in other words. So yes, there might be ancient precursors, there might be pendulum boards and these other devices, but they don't have a direct influence on the talking board or the planchette as we know them. And we can trace that with a fair degree of certainty. So I don't mind drawing that line, and where sometimes Bob doesn't mind leaving it fuzzy, but that's okay.
Well, okay, this leads to my next question then. I understand that the planchette is, and I think you mentioned this, is sort of basically a French invention, possibly from Parisian monastery, is what I've read, and the planchette was basically designed for automatic writing with the insert of a pencil, like you just mentioned. So how did the Ouija board or the talking board and the planchette get married? When did they come together to what we see today?
Well, there's a really funny, I always like to point this out in my research, there's a really funny leapfrog that approaches, and I just mentioned it, and any keen-eared viewers might have caught it, and that is, as early as the Fox sisters, right as the 1840s are turning into the 1850s, you already have reports of alphabet cards being used. Now, for those who need to know, which are the listeners, the earliest forms of spirit communication were knocks, were the rappings of the Fox sisters. So they were these mysterious rappings that would take place on tables, doors, walls, chairs, and it was this breakthrough with the Fox sisters. It's not that ghost stories and spirits didn't exist before, but breaking the threshold of communication with them was what was important. And the most simple the most simple communications were counting. For example, what is my age? And the knocks could rap out a certain number. If it matched up to your age, it must be a miracle. It must be the spirits. They know. Or affirmative and negative knocks. And the code varied over the years, but has settled in modern times to basically 1 for yes, 2 for no, and 3 for ask again or maybe. And so from that, you have what's known as alphabet calling, and that is the act of actually calling out the alphabet until a letter or number is indicated. And so very quickly they begin using these alphabet cards, because as you can imagine, even in our modern perspective where we've got cable television, sitting in a dark room by candlelight for hours on end, calling out the alphabet ad nauseum has got to be tedious, just to spell out simple words and sentences. So they tried to expedite this with these alphabet cards or tiles, and they would point to, they would more quickly point to the letters until the letter was indicated. And so you've got the alphabet card and the pointer, but there's no cooperative writing yet. And it's odd that we get that close to the evolution of the Ouija. I mean, that close. You've got the pencil in hand, the pointer in hand, and the alphabets on a surface. And yet we leapfrog in 1853. We almost take an evolutionary step back to the planchette. So now instead of dealing with the problem of alphabets, you're dealing with the problem of trying to read somebody's cooperatively produced scribbles on a piece of butcher paper. And it's amazing. It's always amazed me that the planchette actually had as long of a history as it did, because it was popular for 40 years before we go back to what the original form was, which is the alphabet board with the indicator. And, of course, the important aspect of that evolution being the cooperative sense of it. Everyone can put their hands on these devices and produce messages. And that really is the important breakthrough. You don't need a medium anymore. Now everyone can contribute. And that's why they became the fads that they did.
Okay. So let's address the elephant in the room, okay? So many people labeled the Ouija board evil and something of demonic activity or even occult. Murch, why do talking boards get such a negative connotation? And do you consider it to be negative or evil?
Well, first of all, I don't place any personality on the Ouija or talking board. So I'll give you an example. We're on the phone, and we get into a fight. And you say bad things to me, and I say bad things to you. And when we're done, you don't take your iPhone and toss it out your window and say, I will never use another iPhone again. But we do when we use a talking board. People really place the blame of what happens or the responsibility of trying to make contact with a spirit, or whether it's your subconscious or whether there's some telepathy going on the actual tool you're using, which is one of the things that fascinates me. Another thing that contributes to this kind of aura around it is that it's been around for almost 125 years. And anything that's been around for 125 years, there's a lot of sensationalism to it. And there are a lot of bad stories in the press. But you got to think what makes the news. And it's usually bad stuff. You know, when a Ouija board helps find Granny's ring, does not make the front page of the Globe. But when the Ouija board tells someone to kill their dad, and they do, well, you've got, mass chaos. One of the things that I collect to kind of understand this story better is to see its place in pop culture. And so you have to look at its place in music and writings, books, anything that will show me how did people view it at the time. And mostly the talking board, especially the Ouija board, wasn't seen as bad or evil overwhelmingly by the public. There were always people who didn't like it. But it didn't happen until The Exorcist. So when the entertainment industry got hold of it and used it as a wonderful way to visually show demonic possession, well then, the cat was out of the bag and everyone was looking to play the Ouija board to make contact with the demon. So the Ouija board has two lives, one which is its historic life, and then it has its Ouija-stitions and this whole urban legend that people believe, your best friend's cousin's next-door neighbor played the Ouija board and became possessed. And, without demystifying the mystifying oracle, all those things are equally important. And another collector, Gene Orlando from the Museum of Talking Boards, actually kind of dared me to do something, which in research is always fun. And so I called and contacted the top 10 psychological facilities and the top 10 medical facilities in the United States. And I asked them all the same thing. In the past 1, 25, 50, 100 years, how many cases and or patients have you had admitted that had anything to do with Ouija board use? And you know what the answer was? 0. Now, that doesn't mean, that's not a scientific study, and it doesn't mean that people haven't gone crazy or had bad things happen to them playing the Ouija board. It just means that either they didn't tell the doctor or it was never written down. But for everything we hear and how horribly bad the Ouija board is, it says something to the degree of what we believe. And one of the most amazing things and mystifying things about the Ouija board is it's all about belief. It's all about what you believe and you bring to the table when you sit down to play.
Brandon, what's your view on this? Do you feel that any communication device is sort of a neutral base, and it's more about the communication from the user itself that people should worry about?
I think so. I think I'm less frightened by the prospect of speaking to some malicious entity than I am tapping into my own subconscious, because that might hold true for many people. Because the scariest demons are those that are already in there, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, the power of persuasion is very powerful, and I think because talking boards have been around for so long, like you were saying, Robert, that people have created this stereotype on Ouija boards and not on other newer tools. And I think you've mentioned this before in previous interviews about the K2 meters and audio recorders. So here's an analogy that may help explain my question better. Say you're sick.
Sure.
For sake of argument, this is sort of like a made-up sickness. You can take a pill and feel better, in a couple of days, or you can have surgery and be back to your normal self in a day or two. The pill is sort of like the new technology, almost instant gratification and no interaction. But the surgery is like the Ouija board. It's more invasive. It's more interactive. It's more hands-on than just taking a pill. Could that be the mentality that people have on using the Ouija board and why they think it's more negative than, say, like an audio recorder or a K2 meter? Because there's more involvement of themselves.
Yes. The Ouija board is a very intimate thing to play. And it's really interesting to watch when people use it. So at Phenomenology last year, we had like 75, 80 people all playing Ouija boards at the same time. And it was fascinating. And usually you get someone who totally believes it, you get someone who doesn't believe it at all, and then people who are kind of up to see what happens. But when the planchette starts moving and it makes that kind of scraping sound across the board, everyone gets quiet. The people who are using it are looking at each other like, are you pushing this? Are you pushing this? And it's a very quiet, intense thing that happens. With technology like K2 meters or EVP recorders, we often feel like the technology makes it safe. So, you take an EVP recorder, you put it down, and you walk away, and you get messages. And same thing with a K2 meter. You put it down, ask a question, see if it blinks. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't make that K2 meter blink on its own. So anything that can make it blink kind of scares me a little bit. Like, okay, well, if it can make it blink, why can't it just throw something and whack me upside the head? So I'm yeah, exactly. So I feel like if there's a danger in communication that, Casper the Friendly Ghost has never really set down the rule book. Like, you can use these things and you're okay, but if you use this one, well, bad. And I think some people feel like because you're touching it, because you're physically touching it, that somehow opens you up more. Maybe it does. But it actually is just an early form. A lot of these tools that people use today, the ghost box, all of these things are just ways to make communication. So to me, it's just a tool. And if you look back early on, one of the huge reasons why the Ouija board was such a success was it broke a lot of Victorian rules. Men and women were not allowed to sit in the dark. And they certainly weren't allowed to sit in the dark with their knees touching. And yet they could do this when they put their hands on the Ouija board. And so it was a great date game. And Norman Rockwell paints the cover of the Saturday Evening Post of May in 1920 with a man and a woman playing the Ouija board because everyone was doing it. So I think what people often forget is we look back in history at things and we put on the glasses that we see things today, but they weren't always seen that way. In fact, I think Brandon can probably talk more about how spirit communication, though it was probably against organized religion, without the iPhone, without the internet, without all the things that we use today, this is what people went home and did. Whether they believed everything that came out of it, it was more acceptable. So like in 1890, 1920, 1940, 1950, you could walk into a house and see people playing the Ouija board. But if you'd walk into someone's house today and the family was around the Ouija board asking questions, you'd probably spin in your heels and get the hell out of there. You know, like it's viewed differently. Our culture has been a bit removed from that.
It's funny. Bob and I actually have an interesting anecdote that we often share. We were together. I guess we were in Maryland, and we had stopped in a small town, and we were going through looking at the antique stores, and of course we ask about Ouija boards and planchettes, and someone sends us to this bookstore, and we walk in, and the owner is actually in the middle of telling someone a very detailed account of a spirit communication and a ghost hunt that he's been on, and he has this enraptured customers, and so Bob and I kind of bide our time, and we go through and we kind of wait for him to stop holding court, and finally Bob breaks the ice and says, "Well, excuse me, sir, do you sell any, he had antiques and stuff in the store, do you ever run across any Ouija boards?" And the man immediately I thought he was going to kick us out of there. He just immediately starts railing against it. If I see a Ouija board, I burn it. I've seen all these crazy things. I've seen, houses set on fire and all this. Like, well, it's probably because you set it on anyway. But so, and he just starts railing against Ouija boards. And, they're of the devil, they're of Satan. And this guy was just talking about having been on a ghost hunt, and that was perfectly acceptable. The Ouija board was not. And then as he finishes testifying against the Ouija board, I said, "Well, sir, what about writing planchettes?" And he says, "What are those?" And I said, "Well, they're writing devices for speaking to spirits." And I described it to him. He says, "Oh, well, no, those sound okay."
Well, Brandon, it goes, I don't know if you're in chat right now, but the conversations that are going on in the chat room are, what do you do with the Ouija board, if you want to get rid of it? Do you burn it? Do you throw it away? And I think, Robert, in the movie Witchboard, I think it was shot with a gun at the end, or at one of the end scenes. What do you say to people who have that mentality that put so much power on it?
Well, I tell, and I think Brandon does too, so does every collector, that the best way to get rid of an antique Ouija board is to send it to us. We would love to take your awful, evil board and put it in our collection. It would be wonderful. But the truth is, this comes down to that Ouija-stition. Like I was reading in the chat room, people are saying you have to burn it. Well, I'll tell you, equally in my research, it says that if you burn your Ouija board, then you're going to feel like you're burning yourself. And then some people say you're supposed to bury it. Well, if you bury it, you may feel like you're suffocating in your you don't want that feeling, so I would say don't do that. It's like anything else. I know people do have these stories and beliefs, but I've told people, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of Ouija sessions. If you don't like what's happening, stop.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything else in your life. Part of the problem with the Ouija board is that it's often people's first experience with the paranormal. So it usually happens when they're at a slumber party or they're young. And it's also the questions you ask. So, I don't know, my mom always taught me, if you don't want to hear the answer, don't ask the question. And yet the Ouija board is so tempting. The questions people start asking in the beginning, is anyone there? Is there any messages for me? And that quickly turns into, who am I going to marry? And it's, when am I going to die? And then people get freaked out and they're really bothered by it. So it's also the questions you ask. And like anything else, things can be fun and things can get scary. And when they do scare you, you just stop. Put it away. Get rid of it. Throw it out. Send it to us collectors. We would much rather have it than see you do anything bad to it. But at the same time, it's just something that it could be a portal. It's not the board. Again, I think people often forget that what's happening is a conversation is happening. And it's happening between you and something else. It could be you and your subconscious. It could be you and the other person who's playing with your subconscious. It could be you and some other entity. It could be telepathy that's happening. But you are having the conversation, and you are using this tool like we are using the telephone to talk. The telephone is not a good or bad thing, though it gets used for all kinds of bad stuff. And for people who say, well, you don't know who you're talking to, I don't know if the callers today remember, when I did before you could do, star 69 and dial someone back, but we used to prank call everybody. I mean, I love the telephone. I had no idea who I was calling, and some of the things those people said to me were awful, horrible, disgusting things, but they were fun as hell. And when I got scared because they told me they were going to come chop me up into a million pieces, I hung up the phone. And, luckily, they couldn't start 69. So I would say to anyone who's using it who gets upset or bothered or it starts getting scary or out of control, just stop. Like everything else, just stop.
It goes along the lines of, somebody having a digital recorder and they're going out to a haunted location and you get some, evil or demonic EVP that comes across and you play it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people get so excited about that, and it's a thrill to them. But on the flip side of it, if that happened on a Ouija board, they would freak out completely.
Yes. Oh yeah. I think it happens. It's just, again, we give the Ouija board a lot of power, a lot more power than K2 meters. But then again, K2 meters and things haven't been around as long, and they're not as interesting, or there haven't been any really big stories that have taken off. And that's a lot, again, that 125 years does a lot for someone's reputation.
Now, I have a question about something that I've seen being marketed as the opposite of the Ouija board. Since there's a negative feeling towards the Ouija board, there's what I've seen is another board called the Angel board, where they say you can talk to angels. Have you seen this, Rob? And what do you think about this disillusion?
I have not only seen it. One of my good friends is Terry, and she is the person who did one of the last Angel boards that has come out. And she's a member of the Ouija Collectors group as well. I think it's an interesting take, and I also think it reflects kind of in the late 90s, in the 2000s, kind of the New Age movement into angels. And so people who use these boards are trying to talk to their guardian angel. And so if the artwork puts you in a place that makes that kind of contact work better, it's fantastic. Again, I love the artwork. I think it's amazing, and it's very, very reflective of the time that it's come out of. You wouldn't have seen an angel board in a time earlier than the 90s. It just wasn't the thing or the way to see things.
But is there truly a difference between the angel board and the Ouija board? I mean, could you be channeling specifically to, a certain set of entities as opposed to everything?
I think anything's possible, but I think if the artwork and the imagery helps put you in a place where that conversation is more likely to happen, then that's great. Are you asking me, could you contact something bad with an angel board just because it's an angel? I mean, again, I think it's if we look at this as a telephone, you can call anybody, and I think it's a lot of what's your intention and how do you go about it. And again, coming to this first experience, I don't know about you, and I'm just going to be really general because we're on the air, but most people's first experiences aren't usually that great, and they're usually over pretty quickly, and people don't talk about them. But the truth is, with the Ouija board, first time you try it, it doesn't usually go very well. People get scared and they put it away, and they carry that with them. And I think that, with anything else, practice makes you better at it. And it depends who you're playing with, and what's the chemistry that's going on there, and how in control you feel. If you have to remember you're having the conversation, you decide you don't want to talk anymore and you stop. And I think the bigger thing people have to think about is these have been around and sold in toy stores for over 125 years. And if there was so much evidence that said these things were horrible and bad things would happen, that doesn't add up to where we are today. It doesn't mean, again, these stories people don't believe them, and that this stuff doesn't happen. Anything bad can happen to you, walking across the street and get hit by a car. But it's not going to stop you from walking across the street.
Okay. Well, this question is for both of you. Have you ever had faith in any of the stories from people that say that the boards and the planchettes carry spirits with them and that they're attached to the devices?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I started off the show just talking about how I felt, and I make no claim to psychic ability, of course, but I always feel when I get an item that you can feel some weight or significance to it. So I think there's something to that, whether it's energy, whether it's subconscious picking up on wear and tear, whatever it might be. So I do subscribe to that. It just seems that some items do carry something with them. And again, like my constant refrain as I leave the theological questions for those of a much higher pay grade than myself, but I feel that some weight, some energy is carried with them. As far as I think that's more of a pop culture thing, that some items have specific spirits tied to them. I know it was certainly something I used to great effect back in my bizarre magic days, but it's not something which I personally subscribe to. No.
Murch, how do you feel about that?
Well, I have over 500 of these boards in my house, and then there's doubles and triples of those and variations. So there's a lot of boards here. And as I tell everyone, the doorway to hell has never opened up here. And if it did, I would probably be selling tickets, and hopefully you'd be interested in it. It hasn't happened, and maybe they love me because I saved them and put them back together again. Maybe they view me as like a caretaker. I don't know. I just think, again, it's what you're trying to do and what you want to do. And if this stuff was bad, I mean, I would not have this many in my house, with my husband, my dogs. Like, I wouldn't put them in that kind of danger if I believe that to be true. I just, it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened yet. And again, witnessed hundreds and hundreds of Ouija sessions. And it's just, I look, why do we go to these conventions? Why are we talking about this? We all want to experience the other side. We all want to know that there might be something else out there. And the beauty of the Ouija board is, for $19.95, you just might get that answer. And that's pretty cool. At 125 years later, I mean, again, we have iPhones, but, the first text messages were sent from the other side through the Ouija board. So.
Well, have either of you had an experience with any of the boards?
I had, I was on the periphery of some very crazy Ouija sessions in my high school days and into my early college days. I didn't take part. I witnessed briefly some of those sessions, and I have no doubt that what occurred there was quite real. Now, the definition of what that was, I have no doubt that communications from somewhere, whether they were entities or someone's subconscious, they certainly occurred and were real and there and experienced, and it was palpable. So I witnessed that. I've never actually had any experience of that magnitude with my hands on the device. And so, maybe it is sort of the skepticism that comes with a collector, like Bob said. When you acquire a certain number of these boards, maybe maybe you sort of lose that magic. Maybe you lose that mystique when sort of like a doctor when they look at the same body part all the time. I guess it just sort of loses its mystique. But so myself, I've witnessed some pretty amazing stuff, some pretty convincing stuff even, but not personally experienced it as far as having my hands on the device.
Murch, have you ever had an experience?
Yeah, I've had a few experiences, and I don't use the Ouija board a lot. In fact, I've only tried it alone a few times. I'm much more likely to use it at these conferences. So if you want to play with me, come to Phenomenology next week. It's funny because as anyone who's had any experience with the paranormal, when it happens to you, when something is spelled out and you think there's no way anyone else could know this, for about 30 seconds you are sure you have proof of the other side. And then after 30 seconds, your brain starts to kick in and you think, oh, wait a minute, like that's kind of a general thing, or maybe someone knew, or maybe this is telepathy. So I think I'm with Brandon where I've had experiences, but I've never been able to chalk any of them up as proof that I was talking to a spirit, But why do we keep playing and why do we keep trying and why is the Ouija board, still mystifying after all these years? Because it just might be true.
Yeah.
Robert, in the beginning of the show, when I did the introduction, I had mentioned that you had an involvement with the inventor of the Ouija, William Fuld, and his family, and you are considered their personal historian. Can you tell our listeners that story, how you got involved with Fuld?
Sure. When I first started, so this is like 1997, I made a website. It was a really horrible website called Ouija Witch's Wonderful World of Talking Boards, and hopefully none of your listeners remember any of this. But it was funny and cheeky, and it was what I knew at the time. And William Fuld, who was one of the original owners in the company and who basically took over the original company and made Ouija boards, him and his family, from 1890 to 1966, his granddaughter wrote in. And so I made contact with that side of the family. And William Fuld had been making Ouija boards. He brought his older brother Isaac into the business in 1897. And they worked together from 1897 to 1901. And William and his brother Isaac got into a huge fight over what only brothers can fight, we don't know. But they used the Ouija board against each other for 20 years in and out of court. There was a huge feud, and they never spoke again. In fact, neither side had ever spoke since 1901. So Kathy, the granddaughter of William Fuld, contacts me. A week later, Stuart Fuld, the grandson of Isaac Fuld, contacts me. So I'm in heaven, right? Like, I'm doing this research, and I think, oh my gosh, like the two people who can help me with all this and people from the families are both contacting me. And then on the flip side, I realized, well, when the other side finds out I'm talking to the other side, they're probably neither one of these people are going to talk to me for very long. But it turned out that, feuds get handed down from families. And they're kind of sad things because William Fuld died in 1927. Kathy did not know her grandfather, obviously. And Isaac died in 1939, and Stuart had he was very young. He had some memories of him, but not enough to know why these two people fought in 1901. And Kathy actually one night just asked me for Stuart's phone number, and she called up her cousin who happened to live one town over. After all these years, they didn't go very far. And Stuart, said, I've waited my whole life to talk to you. So, after that, there was a big Fuld family reunion that I was lucky enough to be invited to, and it was the Ouija board kind of tore this family apart, and then, almost 100 years later, put them back together again, and I kind of landed square in the middle of that. So I've made a lot of good friends. They are a wonderful family. They have preserved and saved so much of the history, and have opened their hearts and their homes to a lot of us collectors who they probably think are crazy, but not crazy as not to have us in their house. So that's nice.
Well, you know what, Murch? I do want to go back to the experience question. Back in, I believe it was 2010, Anthony and I went to Mansfield Reformatory to the event that was there. And I remember that you were there, and your talk was amazing. But I also remember that you had a Ouija board set up inside the prison. And a lot of the things that happened that evening in different parts of the prison were pretty unusual. It was definitely active. I just want to ask, what kind of messages were coming across inside Mansfield? Seeing as the energy that was there, it did seem to be pretty heavy, pretty negative in some cases. Did anything in particular come across, like when you're in a prison as opposed to sitting in a front room?
Well, I've never been to prison, but I do hear a lot of things happen in prison that I'm hoping not to turn. No, look, it's funny that you bring up Mansfield. It is one of my all-time favorite places because, one, I was with Jeff Belanger, who anyone who's listening knows he's just the most hysterical person in the world. But as we were upstairs, this has nothing to do with the Ouija board, but it was the last night of the investigations, and I was taking Dave Schrader around, showing him kind of the place I had been helping monitor. And we were upstairs, and we wanted to play a joke on Jeff. He had a huge group of girls, of course, and so we were upstairs, and there's only one way in, and we're making like kind of noises, and they're starting to scream. And Jeff is, a veteran at this. He knows that someone is doing this to him, so he's like, calm down, this is just someone playing a joke on us. And, we're kind of laughing, it's funny, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden, as that's going on, we just hear this door close, and Dave and I turn around, and then we hear and feel someone walking in front of us go into another room, and another door closes. Now, there's no way in or out except for behind us, and I'm like, holy crap, is this really just happen? And we had just opened up all the closets in those rooms to make sure that no one was hiding or left, in the places. We cleared it out. And when we went into them, the door that we had just left, the first door was closed in the closet, and then the one we heard closed was closed in the other room. We had just opened it. So it was, Jeff loves that story because I was freaking out. Oh my gosh, of course, I totally believed it at the time. And then, again, 5 minutes later, my brain started kicking in, saying, oh, my God, it's 2 o'clock. I haven't slept in 3 days. Could have been a lot of things. But Mansfield it's completely, an active place. A lot of people had these types of experiences there, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I remember. It was amazing. But I do want to ask, okay, now, supposedly bands like Alice Cooper and Cheap Trick, they got their names from using the spirit boards and supposedly getting their names from the other side. Now, I'm not sure if these are true or not, but it's kind of cool to think about it. So have either of you heard any stories like this of people, current or in history, that have used the boards and planchette for use in their lives?
Yeah, a regular consultation? What about you, Bob? Do you?
Well, I mean, there's a number of stories. Brandon just made a great appearance on Mysteries of the Museum talking about Patience Worth, and she definitely used it.
Yes, many novels worth of material. Poems that were considered at the time the best in the country in the 1920s. So, that's someone.
Yeah, and then, in 1886, we recently discovered that a talking board or a witch board actually made its way to the White House. A manufacturer here in Leominster, Massachusetts, actually made one, probably, we think, inspired by these 1886 accounts that he's reading in the newspaper. He manufactures the witch board and sends it to President Grover Cleveland as a wedding gift. He's the only president to get married in the White House. And he sends it to him, and President Grover Cleveland actually writes back and says, thank you so much. I will take this as a token of my friendship, but I don't think I'm going to use it for anything really serious to make any national decisions.
Yeah, he won't be consulting it for any national security advice.
The Ouija board is a huge part of our pop culture. I mean, again, one of the things I really track is it's in movies. So going back to silent films, early 1900s to today. And, for a long time, it's in I Love Lucy, the episode called The Seance. What you see is a lot of people using them as dates and to be funny. And then what happens is you get to the 1950s, 1960s, the Ouija board is used to warn people that something bad's going to happen. Who's the killer? Who's the bad guy? And then you see, in The Exorcist, where it's just flat out, this girl is possessed, she used the Ouija board, you do the math. And since then, it's just such a visual way. And anyone who's ever used a Ouija board knows that incredibly intense feeling of using one where everything gets quiet and time slows down and the messages are being spelled out. And again, that's great when you're looking for yes or no answers or just words that have small letters. But, I mean, imagine, the story of Patience Worth and Pearl Kahn actually writing volumes of prose and poetry one letter at a time. Yikes.
You guys mentioned the word museum. You both were involved with the Ouija exhibit at the Baltimore Museum of Industry. Can you guys tell us about that exhibit?
Well, that was Bob's brainstorm from. Well, I guess Bob, you should probably give the earliest origins on that. You've had such a long relationship with the Baltimore Museum of Industry.
Yeah, like a dream of mine had always been to do an exhibit. I think these things are wonderful representations of great Americana, and that they belong in a museum. For a long time, most people did not share that view,
right.
And so it took 10 years of talking on and off with this museum, and finally, a woman named Kat over there decided this was a really cool thing, and she worked for about 5 years to get this thing going. And I'm glad it didn't happen earlier, because I didn't have these relationships that I had with the collectors. And one of the really awesome things that came out of this exhibit was there were things from a lot of different collectors. So it became a really big collaboration. And for people who came to visit the museum, what they got to see was something that these boards just don't exist in one person's collection. So they got a real treat to see how Baltimore gave birth to this industry, and it was really, it was a lot of fun.
And I've always been grateful to Bob in like you said, in not having done it sooner and making the contacts and the community that has grown up around it since. We were able to give a more fair representation of it. I'm sure Baltimore is the center of Ouija board industry, but at the same time, we were able to give a very nice panoramic in sort of a chronological fashion of the history even leading up to the spirit board, the talking board. We had a spirit trumpet on hand and several specimens of planchettes. There was a little bit on the Fox sisters. So we were able to give a much more fair representation to show that they didn't just pop up in a vacuum. Kenner didn't just paint a bunch of numbers and letters on a board and start selling them in instant national craze. There was such a larger story, just a larger panoramic to be painted as far as their history and where they come from. And so I've always been very grateful to Bob for the opportunity, because obviously I'm the advocate for that earlier history, everything that comes before them. So I've always been very appreciative that we were able to represent that and educate the community on that earlier history as far as where they came from.
Yeah, it's a really important piece of the history, because talking boards don't exist in a vacuum like everything else doesn't. So not only do you have to take off your glasses and of what you think you know about Ouija boards when you learn its history, you also have to go back and figure out what was happening at the time. And why did this happen? I mean, you have so many things. You have spiritualism just really, really taking off. And then you also have manufacturing. So why did the Ouija board, why do we call it Ouija today? Why is that the biggest thing? Well, what happened was it was just around the perfect time for mass production and tons of advertisements. And so because the Ouija was patented between, from 1891 to 1908, no one else could make a talking board. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't. They just kind of broke the patent. And so, they had a huge lead. And when you have that much time for someone to call something Ouija, that's kind of why we still call it that today.
Well, Brandon, did you, talking about the museum and everything and the folks that came in to see the exhibit, what was the response like? Did you get... I guess, were you able to change people's minds? Did they come in with a set mind frame and left the same way, or was it more interactive with them?
Well, I think it was very revelatory for those that participated, not only in the the opening event, but also in the exhibit itself. And that, well, for one, as I just said, exposing them to the larger history of it and showing that, as well as the wide variety. A lot of people, they have this vision and conception, usually of the early Parker Brothers boards and such, and they've probably seen some wooden ones here and there. But the sheer variety, I mean, the fact that Bob has 500 in his collection, he doesn't have 500 of 4 varieties of boards. I mean, when you see the spread, when you visit our websites and see the variations and the companies and the spreads, I mean, I've got a few dozen planchette manufacturers alone, and that doesn't even come close to the folks that produce Ouija boards. So that revelation that it has such a long history, but that there is so much variety, not only in the design of the boards themselves, but other attempted devices and variations, which we also represented there. I think it was quite a revelation to those who maybe just grew up with a Parker Brothers board on the shelf, in the bedroom.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge source of kind of Baltimore pride as well. A lot of people came there thinking, I had no idea this came from my city. I had no idea that this factory was right here. In fact, the building where the Ouija board is said to name itself still stands. And, preserving its history is a big deal. A lot of us collectors, after it took about 17 years to find where Elijah Bond, who patented the Ouija board, turns out he was buried in an unmarked grave. And then a bunch of us collectors got together and donated money to put a headstone in for him. So people could now go visit Greenmount Cemetery to see a gravestone with a big Ouija board on it. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, you know what, guys? I do know that no matter what we present or say tonight, it may not convince some people that Ouija boards are not anything to fear. So what would you both say to someone who is afraid of the boards or who has a, quote, negative experience while using one?
Well, I think I would tell someone, first of all, if they're afraid of it enough not to play it, don't play it. Life is too short to get hung up on the little things, and worrying over whether something is going to hurt you or not when you don't have to do it is silly. So to me, I just say skip it and find something that is more attuned to your level of being comfortable. But for people who are they want to try it but they're nervous, try it with someone you trust. And do whatever it takes, whether it's religious or whether it's cultural, to put you in a place. Some people say prayers, some people visualize white light. Whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable, that when you play this, something good will happen, or at least nothing bad will happen, and that when you're done, it's over. You've turned off the communication. And for people who've had bad experiences with it, for some of those people, I'd say maybe look at how it happened. It's unfortunate, but a lot of the bad experience that I've heard over the years are usually at parties when there's been like some drinking, maybe some drug use. I know no listener ever does either one of those things, but that often causes people to have, these kind of crazy experiences. And so, if that's your first time and you're not comfortable with it, I just wouldn't add that to the mix. It's kind of like drinking is okay and driving is okay, but drinking and driving is not okay. I think it's insane. I think I'm not going to say which board it causes you to be more open to being possessed. I think it leaves you open to having less discretion and less control. And whenever you're dealing with, whether it's your mind, which is an incredibly complex thing, and as Brandon said, he already has multiple demons locked up inside of him. Playing with that when you're under influence may not be.
Bob, you should give a quick rundown of some of the folks on the message boards. Ariana included it, have been asking a rundown of some of the traditions and preparations before using a board. What are those that you have recorded? What's a rundown of those?
Well, they fall under this group of Ouija-stitions, which are people's beliefs. And they're so opposite and different that there's no one thing that works for everyone. The beauty of the movie Witchboard was Kevin Tenney actually took a bunch of these, wove them together, and rewrote the whole history. And it worked in a really bad movie, B-movie kind of thing. But, a lot of people say you should ask the board, Ouija, can you tell me something? Ouija, are there any messages for me? Rather than trying to make direct contact. Other people believe, no, you just ask if there's a message. A lot of people believe that when you're done, you have to sign off and put it towards goodbye. And if you don't, you've kind of left that line open. All of those things, again, it comes down to what do you believe? If you believe that these things will work and protect you, you should do them. But there's no one right way. I've just heard so many of them. Again, people, you have to burn the board. But then, other people, no, we tried to burn the board and I felt like I was burning myself. And that's not good. So, again, there's just so many of these things. But I do have to make
for the longest time too, as Bob knows, I've been trying to track down an actual buried Ouija board that someone sold on Etsy. And they actually found it. They were doing remodeling on their porch, and they dug this board up. They ran across it, and it was, half rotten, and it's unfortunately a really rare board that's highly sought after, one of the Black Dot Mystifying Oracles. But this thing, it looks like the Death Star in Return of the Jedi when it's only half built, it's all jagged and everything. And it's something we would really love to feature in the book because we actually have a specimen that was buried and recovered. So I think that would just be a fantastic representation for the book of, the eventual fate of so many boards all over the country.
Yeah.
What do you both hope to take away from the interview tonight? Is there like one particular thought or piece of history you would like our listeners to understand? Brandon?
For me, it's sort of my crusade of recognition for the poor little forgotten planchette. It's just it's the older sibling of the Ouija board. I have such a grand respect and admiration for them. I'm both proud and honored that I really am responsible for the groundbreaking research on them. They were just sort of considered the older, forgotten, red-headed stepchild of the family, and to uncover that that's really not the case, that they really have a fantastic 40-year history. They were one of America's earliest fads. I mean, it was just crazy. The pop culture phenomenon that they were was only really, to me, rivaled by the later arrival of the Ouija board and really echoed by it. So for me, it really is a crusade of appreciation for the poor little planchette, and I think my website gives a fantastic overview and galleries of those at mysteriouslanchette.com. And it's something I feel like I'm kind of giving back, not only to the other collectors and sharing that information with them, but really to the world, because if I'm not going to do it, I don't think anyone else is going to come along, so I better keep working.
Robert, what about you? What do you want people to take away from your thoughts?
Well, I just want people to realize that the Ouija board's been around for a long time, and that it's been part of our pop culture for over 125 years, and that alone is very interesting. And so it's something that is very polarizing, and I'm just hoping that when people hear the history and the facts versus just what they've been told or what they hear, that they come away with a little more interest and don't kind of just go by, again, my mother's best friend's cousin's aunt's neighbor used a Ouija board and bad things happened. I'm just hoping it's a fascinating history that, it touches all of us. Again, there's not too many things in the world that you can put in front of someone and they just know how to do it. I mean, it's just such a piece of us. But I do have to give a shout out to Noah Tizik, because I promised him I would do that. And I know he's in the chat room probably waiting for me to do this. So he's my favorite cyber stalker.
We know Noah very well. His head is, I think, expanding at the moment.
Undoubtedly. He is awesome. So he's my favorite cyber stalker. I love it.
Well, you know what, guys? Next week, you both will be attending I knew I was going to mess it up. Phenomenology 105 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Now, I have been trying to do anything to get to go there for a long time. What fun and interesting things do you both have lined up at this event?
Well, we'll both be lecturing, I believe, on Saturday. I'll be starting first, as appropriate to kind of give the earlier history leading up to the Ouija board. So we'll be lecturing on that in a little more detail than we've had a chance to here, and just sort of tracing the history and the phenomenon and everything. And for me, of course, obviously the focus being on planchettes and other early spirit communication devices. And I've really been recently into laboratory experiments for spirit communication, so I might hint at a little bit of that. There's some really crazy, freaky stuff, some really convincing stuff that has taken place throughout all this. And I recently discovered pretty much the the definitive source of information on that subject, the definitive study on those spirit communication lab experiments. So I think just sort of peeling back the veil a little bit on this history and really getting into the dirt and grit of it. And we'll also be set up there, so we'll be able to visit in person and ask any of these questions. And we'll have some specimens on site. So I'll try to bring some of the heavy ones and let folks handle those, and maybe even give the planchette a whirl if they've never had a chance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Murch, what do you got planned?
Well, Hasbro was really nice and always donates a lot of Ouija boards to any of the events that I attend. So I'll be bringing a few cases of those. And I'm just hoping that, we'll get a lot of people playing them, one, kind of under supervision, and then two, when they're on their ghost hunt. So it's always interesting to see if people using the Ouija board are picking up the same things that are their EVPs or their T2 meters or whatever they decide to use, what's happening along the same time. So, yeah, we'll see. And hopefully for people who are a little wary, maybe after the talk, they will take me up on the offer to have a session with them, and we'll see what happens. It's always a lot of fun. Phenomenology is amazing. And if any people are interested, if they're not already signed up, they should go to phenomevents.com. It's a great, great time. I've done these since the beginning, and my most fond memories are from this conference. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic event. So anybody that's in the area needs to get there if they're not already. It's going to be really, really great.
Now, I do have one more question that came up in the chat room, and that was about the museum exhibit. Are there any plans to take it anywhere else in the country?
We're in discussion. I'll let Bob handle that one.
Yeah, there was a huge response to it, way bigger than I thought it would be. This again was like it's a very small kind of, this would be amazing, and then it turned out it got quite a bit of national attention, and again, because it's not something people normally get a chance to see. So I have talked to quite a few museums, whether this becomes a traveling exhibit or whether it becomes more of, it spends a little more time than 6 months at a museum. I don't know yet. It's kind of fun. But luckily, I've made some amazing friends, and the collectors are great because they share what they find. And that just didn't happen a long time ago. So it's not only great to share with each other, it's great to share with the public. So, hopefully it all pans out, and you will have us back on to talk about the next exhibit.
Okay. Well, you know what? I can say that this has been an amazing experience talking to you both tonight. So for more information and to find out what the boys are up to, please check out Murch at his website, robertmurch.com, and Brandon's website is mysteriousplanchet.com. And as they said, if you have not signed up to attend Phenomenology 105 next week, check out the event site at phenomevents.com. Gentlemen, are there any other places we can catch up on your work, or is there anything new that you're both currently working on that we may see in the near future?
I do have one thing.
Yeah,
that I forgot to tell you guys about. I'm so sorry, but I keep forgetting to do this. My latest crusade is to try to get the Ouija board in the National Toy Hall of Fame. And so there's a couple of ways you can do it. On Facebook, we started a Facebook page, and if you just look up Nominate Ouija, it'll come out. If you like that, that's great. They're watching that page, so as many people as we can get to like it would be great. I mean, I just can't see a place that has G.I. Joes and not Ouija boards. So within that link, you can also go to the National Museum of Play and nominate it there as well. But again, Facebook, type in Nominate Ouija, you'll go right to it.
Well,
and we also, Bob and I have, it's sort of been a long time in the making, and it'll probably still be a long time in the making, but we're collaborating on really the definitive book on the history of spirit communication tools that will take the reader from the nascent beginnings of the phenomenon right up to the modern era. It'll be just a fabulous, thick, heavy, table-crushing coffee table book that we can't wait to debut. And in the meantime, for myself, since I'll be doing the bulk of the writing, I've been slowly leaking some of my research and stuff on my blog, which is linked to on my website, or it's mysteriousplanchet@blogspot.com. And so it's sort of little hints and some in-depth research. Maybe we won't be able to cover some of the stuff in the depth that the blog does, but it's little bite-sized chunks of either Ouija history, planchette history, or just related, stuff. It's stuff we can sort of branch out a little bit and just cover some of the more unusual things out there in a little bit looser format. So that's fun. But yeah, one of these days that book will, I'm sure everyone will trumpet it from trumpet it toward the stars when it's ready for its debut.
Well, I know we can't wait for it. Well, you know what? We wish you both good things, and we hope to have you back on the show again.
Absolutely. We hope you'll have us.
Okay. It was great talking to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
Absolutely. With all phenomenology. Good night.
Yes.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night. Well, I think I just deleted Lucy out of the call. So Lucy, please call back in. But that was a great interview. I really enjoyed this. Lucy and I have been trying to get a Ouija or talking board show on for such a long time, and we have never done a show about the Ouija board before. And when we were doing the research on this, I could not think of any other person than Brandon Hodge and Robert Murch to get on, because I think that they are they epitomize what an expert is on the Ouija itself. They are historians. They are experts. They are collectors. They just they know everything about both the planchette and about the Ouija board. And we've met Murch many years ago, and he's just a great guy. And so we thought that this would be an awesome show to have the both of them on. I'm sure that there are a lot of other people that know about the Ouija and have done books on it and the like. But I think to kick off this topic of Ouija, it couldn't have been any other better person to have on than Brandon and Robert. What do you say, Lucy? Did I cut you off? Did I kill your phone?
Yes, you did.
Sorry.
I was trying to work my Ouija mouse pad here, and all of a sudden I was gone.
What did you think?
I thought it was absolutely awesome, and I really think that they presented a very good story about talking boards. I mean, one of the things I noticed when we announced this topic and we were posting stuff, it was just the comments and the reaction from a lot of the listeners, where it was like, "Oh, I'll never touch one of those, and they're bad news." And like Murch was saying, I think a lot of it has to do with what's been put in the media. Because one of the things that really struck me was, really, what is the difference between using a talking board and using a digital recorder? I mean, basically, it's the same thing in my mind. I don't know about you. I mean, how do you feel?
How do I feel about what? The show or about the boards?
The boards.
You know, for the longest time, and it goes to what Murch was talking about, that, you know, the first time anyone really uses a Ouija board is when you're young, when you're a kid. It's that, you know, that first sort of, you know, that journey into, you know, the other side and talking to ghosts and talking to spirits. The first thing kids do is, and it's the one thing that they know of that they can do, and it's easy for them to purchase this in, you know, Toys R Us or Walmart, or actually, no, it's not in Walmart, but, you know, in all these other stores, it's easy for them to get, break out, and just have fun with. And some have fun, some get scared out of their wits, or whatever. And that happened to me. I was scared out of my wits when I had first used the Ouija board. And it wasn't of the communication that came out about from the board itself, but it was what happened in the room while we were doing it, and it just completely freaked us out. But and I kind of still had that feeling of Ouija boards, that they were sort of evil. You watch that movie Paranormal Activity, and they show it in there as well as not as so much as a portal, but it creates that aura that there's something evil or negative about it. And I kind of still had that feeling towards it, but when I started to get into paranormal investigating, I kind of sort of related the digital recorder and the Ouija board to being the same. It's still a communication. And I started, I guess, for myself, unfolding or revealing the truth within the board. I stopped giving the board that power and that mystique, and I wasn't, deathly afraid of it, or I wasn't opposed to using it. I think people within the paranormal field and the paranormal community, I think a lot of them still say that. They still say, I would never use a board in a haunted locations, but yet they'll whip out a K2 meter and a digital audio recorder, and it's pretty much the same thing. And it goes back to what I was saying before. It's more hands-on, pardon the pun, but it's more hands-on with a Ouija board because you're more physically interactive with it than just pressing the red button on a digital audio recorder, and leaving in a room or leaving it by your side. I just think once I started to use that, it started to open up my eyes to what really is the Ouija board, and it's nothing more than just a way of you communicating with the spirit. That board is not creating the communication. You are doing it.
Well, I know I was still kind of on the fence, and of course, like you, my experience was when I was young at a party, and of course, everybody sits around and they say, oh, let's do this. But I think listening to both of these guys, and rarely will I call someone an expert, but I'm going to call these guys experts. Listening to them talk about the Ouija, talk about the talking boards, and where they came from, I'm a bit more open to it now. I really was, I was kind of like on the fence. I haven't really used one, haven't thought about it, but it did what Murch had said about, like, it's you. You're the one making that communication. So if someone has some kind of medium ability, if someone has more of a connection to the other side or is able to pick up on that, I think those are the ones that are going to actually probably get more of a response from the board.
Was it just from listening to Murch recently that made this change, this sort of, epiphany of Ouija boards?
No, I think going along as I'm learning more about, our connections to the other side, and a lot of it goes way back to coming to the realization that what you have in your own heart when you start makes a big difference. So I think if you're in the right place, if you're have the right intentions, I think it would be fine. Now, it's possible. Let's say for a fact that someone has done something, or maybe isn't thinking right, or has probably, let's say, gone into and maybe toyed with negative issues. Maybe attempted to try to, conjure up a demon or something like that. I'm kind of feeling that kind of person probably would be more likely to have a negative experience. But it's not going to be just with the Ouija board. It's going to be while they're paranormal investigating. Mm-hmm. It's going to be while they're using anything, the digital recorder, while they're using the Ovilus. I mean, I think what I'm learning is it really does depend on your intentions when you start.
Right. It's the user itself. It's the person that is functioning that communication. It's not the board. The board is just the tool to facilitate the movement of the planchette around the board so that it actually spells out. Obviously, a piece of cardboard or a piece of wood and maybe plastic obviously cannot regurgitate the words or the phrases or the sentences or that communication from the other side like a digital recorder does. The board, you need to have writing on it, and so it basically works the same way. It's just this there's just more, it's just more hands-on. They're more manual with a board than you are with a digital recorder, but yet people still, they create that line in the sand between the two, that one is much more evil, much more negative than the other. And I hope tonight, the discussion with Robert Murch and with Brandon Hodge, that sort of that message was conveyed over, that, it's more so, like you were saying, Lucy, that it's more so about the person. You have to be in a good frame of mind. You are the one that has to have a clear conscience. You are the one that you are not supposed to go into it with bad intentions or have negative thoughts, because what you have is what you're creating. If you have negative thoughts, you are going to create and attract those negative thoughts or those negative feelings, that negative energy and the negative entities and the spirits to you. That's what happens. It's almost sort of like karma in a way. What you put out is what you get back. If you have that negativity, that's what you're going to get back. And it's not just the board. It's in life, in paranormal investigating, like you were just saying. It's in everything.
Mm-hmm. So now I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
So, do you want to try using a Ouija board on a paranormal investigation?
I was going to mention it to you. I really was going to mention it to you about possibly doing it.
In my head again. There you go.
I know. I'm in your head again. I was thinking about it the other day and thinking maybe I should go out and buy one, and we can do it at our live investigation at Pottstown Elementary School, which is coming up in, 2 weeks?
14 days.
I know, you're counting down the hours. March 29th. So maybe we will do that. Maybe we'll do it on the air.
That would be awesome. I'm in. Like I said, I was on the fence, but you know what? I'm honestly thinking that it really is with the user. And again, it's hard for me to make that distinction between the board and all the other equipment that we use. So I'm in. I'm so willing to use it.
I think we just have to prepare ourselves beforehand. Yes. We have to make sure that we are in the right frame of mind, which is what we always do anyway when we go into a supposed or a known haunted location. We go in with the right frame of mind. We get rid of the negativity. I do a little bit of a meditation, which, Lucy, you don't know about, but I do a little bit of a meditation, maybe even the night before, just to clear everything out, away from me and out of me, just so that it's sort of like a clean slate, a fresh canvas when I walk into a location. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why whenever we do go to a location, we come back with a lot of experiences and evidence. I think that sort of helps the matter. And it's not going to be any different when we go to Pottstown Elementary School on March 29th. It's going to be the same thing. We're going to do the same, and I'm going to do it the same way with the Ouija board if we do it.
Well, I think anyone that reads my Facebook page knows that I have an ongoing dialogue with my angels. And usually before we go into a spot, I'm not going to lie, before we went to the Leska, I was a little bit apprehensive, and that was only because of all of the things that I was reading and, people posting their experiences. But once we got there, it was fine. It really was almost a pleasant experience.
Well, that goes to the power of persuasion. You were getting feedback from people and from writings that the place was so negative and evil, and that persuasion built up that, what do I want to say? I can't even think of the word right now.
It was
that anxiety, anxiety in you or that trepidation before going into that location, and then it wasn't until we got there and the true feelings started to come from that home that it was sort of, we were not at ease, but I think we were able to understand it better.
Yeah, so I think it's an awesome idea, and I would love to do it live on air, and I think it's great. I just can't wait.
Well, we'll try it.
Okay.
I wanted to move on a little bit because we only got about 26 minutes left, and we don't have fan mail to read tonight, but we wanted to do a little bit of a update, an update to our last week's show, which was Petrus Romanus. The final Pope is here. When we were talking about St. Malachy's prophecy, and basically at that point when we had that interview with our guest, the Pope obviously was not nominated or was not elected. The conclave had not started yet. It actually only just started this week, earlier on Tuesday. And so you couldn't do a sort of full circle or a complete synopsis of this whole thing. I kind of wish we had our guest on today about that, because it would have been really interesting to talk about. But I think the conspiracy theories are started to run around now, and not so much conspiracy, but more along the lines of the theories in regards to how is this Pope now related to the St. Malachy prophecy, which is that this Pope is the last Pope, the 112th Pope, according to St. Malachy's prophecy, that will govern the Vatican and will lead us into, I guess, for lack of a better word or phrase, the end of the world. And some of the theories that are going around now, and these are on a couple of websites. This one is from beforeitsnews.com, and they've started to put theories together in regards to the St. Malachy prophecy and Pope, our new Pope, Pope Francis, to the fact that, or not the fact, but this is what they're claiming could be a relation to it, or some sort of correlation to it, that Pope Francis, and the name that, and I can't say his name. I can't say his name for some reason. I can't say his last name. Lucy, is it Bergoglio?
Bergoglio.
Bergoglio. Jorge Bergoglio. I can't say it. Sorry. He took the name Francis, and so Pope Francis is named for Francis of Assisi. Now, Francis of Assisi's real name, or I guess his birth name, is Giovanni Francesco di Pietro Bernardone, and Pietro means Peter. Now, they're making the claim because St. Malachy's prophecy, Petrus Romanus, which is Peter the Roman, will be the last and final pope. The correlation with St. Francis of Assisi's real name, Giovanni Francesco di Pietro Bernardone, Pietro, Peter, they're making that link. The other link that they're making is with Pope's real name, Jorge Bergoglio. I'm going to butcher that. Bergoglio. Berg, the first four letters of his last name, Berg, B-E-R-G, in German means mountain. And according to the prophecy, and I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it in front of you, Lucy?
No.
It was about moving the 7 mountains or 7 hills. I can't remember what it is.
It was the city that the great harlot would be destroyed in the city that sits on 7 hills. And
right.
Rome is built on 7 hills.
Right. And so if you take his first 4 letters of his last name, Berg, in German it means mountain. Now, that's a pretty far stretch. I'm sure they probably went through the gamut of every nationality and every country to figure out if there was some correlation to it. And in German, that means mountain, so they're sort of correlating that again to that area. What do you think about this, Lucy? Do you think that people are stretching?
Reading some of the articles, I do feel that there's a bit of a stretch. Now, there are a couple things that do fall into place. And the one that struck me that does fall into place is, even though Pope Francis is from Argentina, he was the Archbishop of the church there, he's the son of Italian immigrants. So basically, by birth, nationality, he is Italian. So he, therefore, Roman. The other part about it that I don't know. I mean, I still have a problem with it, with his name, with the name of Saint Francis of Assisi. Di Pietro means of Peter. So, I know maybe it's nitpicking, but it just doesn't strike me as a match. Some of the other things, with the prophecy, I'm not taking it literally, but what I'm getting from this, I mean, of course, there's a lot of work in front of this Pope. There's a lot where people have been leaving the church in droves because they don't agree with the thinking. The new Pope, Pope Francis, is definitely a conservative, okay? There are issues within the church that, have to do with, same-sex marriage, with contraception. He's a very hardline person on these things. Those are things within itself that can destroy the church. And what I've learned about the church is, and I hate to say it this way, but the Catholic Church is based on wealth. Well, when people start leaving the church, there goes that wealth. In essence, if the wealth leaves, then you're going to literally destroy the church. Now, whether it means the whole, the Vatican is going to come crumbling to the ground, I don't know. Maybe there'll be an earthquake that happens, and then everybody can connect that to that. But I'm not completely convinced that the prophecy is totally fitting to what's happening.
Well, we did talk last week, and I'm going to bring Noah on the line here in just a minute, but I just wanted to finish my point on this a little bit. The prophecy itself talks about Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. Now, most of the popes within history are considered Peter, are considered the Peter of Rome, and so this may have been a generalized prophecy. It may have not have been as so specific as his other ones, because if you read his other prophecies, and the 110th, the 109th, the 98th, there's the correlations between the two are pretty much uncanny, and there's some really, really the prophecies that he had written down or are so claimed by St. Malachi that he had written them down were just amazing. And so this could be just a general influx of okay, this one's going to be the last one, no matter what it is or who it is, this one's going to be the last one. And he just named it Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. And it could just be anything. And I know people are going to pick at that and now try and correlate with everything. They're probably going to go to now next his coat of arms, which a cardinal chooses prior to, I believe, being a cardinal. And so that would already have been set for when he was cardinal, that they'll try and pick that apart, and they'll probably pick at the imagery and see if whether or not it relates to a Petrus Romanus or to that last prophecy of what it meant. But we did talk last week also about a change coming. And we also talked about a change of the two sides to it, that, it was the end of the world, or as what we were calling it, or what we were referring to it as sort of like the 2012 doomsday thing, that one thing ends and then another beautiful thing begins. Now, what's been happening so far with Pope Francis, and what we've seen just within the first day or in the first morning of his papacy, is that he is not taking the riches of the Vatican. He is not abiding by what pretty much the Vatican has given to all of its popes, the limousines, the entourage of people that will, they'll be able to pull your pants down so that you can go to the bathroom, for lack of a better phrase. They will do everything for you. This Pope does not want to do that. Because he's a Jesuit, I believe that this is the faith, this is what their belief is, that they want to go back to 1 AD and to when Jesus was around, and having that humbleness within him. And so I'm sure Noah right now is biting his lips, and he wants to talk about this. Right, Noah?
I am. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Hi, Noah.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for letting me invade your show yet again. I do have to clear one thing up, though. I am not a stalker of Robert Murch. I'm supportive of what he does, and I really like what he does. But I'm so glad you guys brought up the issue of the papacy, because I followed it very close, and I've been I was anxious to hear who they would choose, and I've read all of the prophecies, and we know how prophecies go. Mm-hmm. And I think that both of you have presented your perspective. Your perspective, I think, is a very sober one, and it's a very balanced one, because as we've seen, and as I joked about in the chat room, there's all these doomsday prophecies that come up, and everyone's ready for the rapture, for Cher's final tour, or whatever the next big one is. But here's my perspective on it. I think that the Catholic Church, and I consider myself Catholic still, I think it's an important part of our culture. And with the election of this new Pope, I think they really had a hard decision to make, and I'm glad they made it quickly. He is very conservative on a lot of issues, but at the same time, I don't think that, according like the prophecy states, he's going to run from a burning Rome in December. What my research has shown is we're living in a time of transition according to three of the major world religions. In Catholicism, yes, he is the last pope in some ways, and I'll elaborate in a second. In Buddhism, Tenzin Gyatso, the current Dalai Lama, he is the last Dalai Lama. His predecessor, the Panchen Lama, was kidnapped by the Chinese government at age 5, so he has nobody to come after him. We see the same thing in Hinduism. They believe that we're in what's called the Kali Yuga. It's the final stage of humanity as it is. But like we saw with the Aztec calendar, I think that what's happening is we're moving from one consciousness to a higher level. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the past we followed religions very strictly because we weren't as educated or evolved or as high functioning as we are now. And I'm hoping that with this new Pope, it's going to be the end of what the Catholic Church was into something different, into allowing us to be much more free thinkers. He's refused to even do a lot of the traditional things that other popes have done, and you guys have probably read about this, including sitting on the literal throne of Peter. I think and Francis, like you were saying, Lucy, was such an odd choice. It really struck me as odd. I mean, I immediately started Googling it to see had there been another Pope Francis. And then, I read that, St. Francis, when he received the stigmata, he was allegedly told that he would rebuild the church. Mm-hmm. And I think that this man has a very heavy burden, just like the Dalai Lama, just like the Hindu people. They know that something's in the air. Mm-hmm. And I think that rather than everybody freaking out about this stuff, I think we should see it as a positive move, where organized religion, where they realize they have to kind of work with reality, not within the confines of things that have been done for 2,000 years in Christianity or 7,000 in Buddhism. They have to really recalibrate the way they've been doing things. Otherwise, people are just going to fall away. I just read a Pew study. We have the highest number of people that are considered nones, that they adhere to no religion in all of history since they've been recording it. Back in 1935, approximately 5% of the population did not associate with any particular religion in the U.S. Between 1990 and now, that's went up dramatically. 1 in 4 people do not identify with a religion, and there's a crisis there. And so I think that because we are free-thinking people, we can see the beauty and the value in all religions. And I think that hopefully, I want to see this Pope kind of put out the olive branch and not be the type of Pope that says, we're the one holy apostolic church, everyone else is wrong, and actually reach out to other faiths and bring peace to the world, because I'm sure a lot of people would agree, a lot of our turmoil in the world is based on dogma and religion. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we have trouble in the Middle East. That's why our country's divided pretty much down the middle. I mean, people, they cling to these beliefs for one reason or another. So in short, I see these prophecies as a positive sign, not as for you, Lucy, the tower, the burning tower in the tarot, where, something horrible is going to happen. I see it more as an opportunity where we can all advance, find unity, and not be tied up into dogma so much as into thinking about what really matters to humanity and what's going to help sustain the planet, help keep peace. So I don't see it as a scary thing at all.
Mm-hmm. I think what may be going on and what may have gone on within St. Malachi when it was prophesied with him was that possibly the diehard Catholics or the devoted Catholics would see a change in the church and a change in the Vatican as sort of a sacrilegious thing, as sort of a antichrist, as sort of an evilness, because they may not feel or they don't think that there should be a change. That any kind of change or shift in any kind of doctrine within the religion would be something sacrilegious. And so that may be the point of his prophecy, was that, it was going to be this quote unquote end of the world, but in actuality it is a transition. It is a repair of the religion itself into something that is better for its parishioners and for its followers.
Well, if you take it literally, to a person who is so diehard about their faith and very ingrained in it, let's say if their church, their organized religion changes, in essence, to that individual person, it could be the end of the world. It's right. The end of their individual world. The things that they know, that they're familiar with, are changing, and that can be really traumatic to someone. But I agree with you both. I mean, it is. I don't feel that it's a negative thing. I don't feel that it's a bad thing.
I don't either. And when they showed the Pope, at first I was like, really, another honky? But then I found out it wasn't a true honky. It's like, okay, so he's not 100% a honky. He's from the Southern Hemisphere, Latin America. And then when they said where he was from, I thought of Evita immediately. Him standing out on the balcony. I could hear the theme song to Evita.
Don't cry for me.
Exactly. Or Madonna up there. I mean, where's the next Pope? I know, Anthony, you were really pushing, but they didn't vote. You didn't get enough votes. I was petitioning the white smoke, you would come out, but...
Tard the cat gave up. I'm telling you, Tard the cat gave up, so I feel as though I am Pope.
You are definitely the Pope of this group, but...
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Now I got to deal with this.
Uh-oh. No, but I'm very encouraged by it, because I think the past over a decade, since 9/11, we've seen a lot of weird changes in society and in the world in general. And even with what's going on with North Korea, they're kind of downplaying that, but they're very obstinate. I think that because of the power that, and people can deny this, but the Catholic Church does wield a lot of power. I think that this is a good thing. And as you both indicated, especially you, Lucy, with these changes, it would seem like the end of the world to people that held strongly to those beliefs, or maybe with you, Anthony, that it scares them, because any time our faith is questioned, it's a scary thing. But
right.
as paranormal enthusiasts or practitioners or whatever people are, we've all had to kind of recalibrate our belief systems because we've had experiences that kind of defy or aren't categorized in whatever faith we were raised in or that we weren't raised in. So we've had to reconsider that. And I think that by bringing in people with new ideas, like this new Pope, regardless of his past, and people are going to dig for the past, there are a lot of big stretches people are making. We need to look at the facts rather than look at superstition. Much like your guest talked about with the Ouija board, we've all been raised to be terrified of that. And I think Murch was right when he said The Exorcist, the movie, when she's talking to Captain Howdy, that for some reason that went into our collective consciousness here in the U.S., and we saw the Ouija board as something scary when, in fact, as you guys indicate, it's really no different than using a voice recorder. It's much more tactile. And I love the way you put it, Anthony. You said it's manual, which makes it really hands-on and a little bit more creepy. But at the same time, there's really not a difference, and it's just another tool. So I'm talking in circles now.
I don't want to cut you off, but Lucy's going to intro next week's show, and take a listen to it because we'd love for you to call in.
Absolutely.
All right, Noah. So we're gonna end the show. We got about 4 minutes left, so just listen to Lucy. What she's going to say is what our topic is next week, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
all right,
Noah.
Take care.
Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, let's go. Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week this week is Debbie G. Callahan. She's from Bentonville, Arkansas. She likes ghost hunters, ghost adventures, Celine Dion, Sarah McLaughlin, and, of course, she likes Paranormal Review Radio. Thank you, Debbie, for being a fan, and congratulations.
Absolutely, congrats. And don't forget, if you want to be Paranormal Review Radio Fan of the Week, just like us on our Facebook page, Paranormal Review Radio.
Okay, His Holiness, can I do the ending now?
Yes, you can.
Okay, now that we know that Ouija boards are not dangerous, we're all going to run out and get one, right? No? Well, the talking boards are good examples where movies and urban legends have given a negative impression of something. No matter what you have heard, you owe it to yourself to keep an open mind and check out what is being said before you make a decision on whether or not you want to use a talking board, an angel board, or any kind of spirit communication device. Do the research and never, never do anything that you are not comfortable with. Most of all, if someone doesn't want to try something, respect their opinion. We want to thank Brandon Hodge and Robert Murch Jr. for joining us and enlightening us to the world of Ouija. It was an honor to talk to a couple of real experts. So, speaking of talking, it is time to bring back some of the best guests that we have ever had. You, the listener. It's time for another open mic show. You know, we love talking to you. And the open mic shows we have done so far have brought up some of the best discussions on fraud, immortality, demonology, and so much more. So get ready. What do you want to bring up? If you've got a question, you got a gripe about something in the paranormal, do you have a paranormal experience that you want to share with us? Is there something about your show that you want to tell us, good or bad? Well, next week, be sure you call in and don't be shy. Tell everyone what's on your mind. Thank you, everyone, for listening. You guys, you're simply amazing. Anthony, thank you so much for another fun show. So, until next week, dear peeps, have a communication-filled and paranormal week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Paranormal Review Radio. Freeview Radio.